Hey guys, thanks for coming. As you all know, this is the the interview workshop. So basically, I'll be going over what kinds of interviews there are, how you can prepare for them, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll be specifically going. Be spending a long time on the coding portions and like the tech on technical interviews, but I will be going over all types of interviews because they're always applicable. However, this will just be like comp sci specific. This won't be like for anything else. You know, it's because we're all trying to secure these internships. However, okay, so starting with types of interviews, there's quite a few different types of interviews that you'll see if you're trying to get a full-time position or an internship. I'm going to focus specifically on internships, and since you guys are mostly first and second years, and just talk about those. So a lot of times you'll get something that's automated, especially with larger companies, and those will be online assessments, one, two, maybe even three. Generally, you'll have one or two of them. Phone screenings are extremely common. Phone screenings are generally just a quick 15 to 30 minute type of thing where the recruiter or the HR person or maybe a developer will just ask you about yourself, maybe like a quick technical question, nothing coding related, just some quick stuff to test your knowledge and just kind of get a feel for what kind of person you are, if you're going to fit into their team. A video interview, in-person interview, and a technical interview all can be kind of interchanged. Obviously now we're just going to be doing video interviews. I did a video interview for my Amazon internship 2 years ago now, 1 year ago. So before COVID, so that's still a thing that's going to happen. I've also done in-person interviews, obviously before COVID, but you know how it is. And technical interviews, I've kind of set that apart because they're a little bit different, but we'll get there. So first, let's talk about your CV. I did a resume workshop video that's up on the BCS channel. So I spent about 2 hours talking specifically about resumes. I don't really go into too much detail about cover letters because a lot of times cover letters really aren't necessary in today's industries. Sometimes they are, sometimes they'll ask for them, which I find extremely annoying because it takes forever to write one and I hate it, but it is what it is. But two things one thing I want to say about resumes and cover letters is that you need to tailor them. If you're just sending off a generic resume or a generic, even worse, a generic cover letter, it'll come across as like you haven't put any energy into this, and you don't. Basically, the company will see you as a person that is not very interested in it, and you want to come across as someone who is very interested in this position. So especially your cover letters, like I've made a mistake before where I didn't send in the wrong cover letter. Like it was addressed the same, but I accidentally forgot to copy and paste one of the company's names in because I had like a kind of generic one, and I was just like, okay, copy and paste Avigilon, boom, 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 and then I missed one, and I had the old company's name, so I was thanking Clio at the end, and it was terrible. They called me out on it, and I didn't get an interview. So don't do that. That was bad. And tailoring your resumes, you can't tailor your resumes quite as much, but if you're applying for a very specific position, like say you're applying to something that's specifically front end, and maybe you could like increase a couple of lines on the front end parts and just take away some of the other stuff. Just try to show that you really have these specific skills that are listed in the job posting. And company research, extremely important. I've been caught with I've been caught where I have not done company research, and then they've asked me about the company and I haven't been able to answer, and it was very embarrassing. So you want to do company research. It's very impressive if you can just rattle off some stuff about the company, like especially like what they do. I didn't even know what that company did. So you definitely need to know what they do, who they work with, what their clients are, what kind of technology stack they use. Any research about the company is going to be beneficial. So quickly, getting the interview. Realized that's something I didn't really talk about in my resume workshop. So the obvious one would be applying through normal channels. So this is just This is just job postings on LinkedIn. You know, you can just Amazon computer science internships, and ta-da! You have all your job results. So these are the normal channels, and these are probably the least likely to land you a job, just because they're very impersonal. Not to say they don't. Like I've gotten jobs through these channels, but you do have higher rates of success with other means. So you could do something called cold calling, although it's emailing these days. So this is where, if you're really interested in a specific company, I've done this before, and so let's say I'm interested in Splunk. So if I go to Splunk, then you can see what people work at Splunk. And oh, look at that! I'm actually connected with somebody that works at Splunk. That's great. Or there's a bunch of people that I have second, I'm like a second, whatever they call it, second degree of separation from. And then I think you can, yeah. So like I see that Kevin Choi, Michelle Northfield, I went to school with her. Oh, Santa Ono, great. Oh, I worked with this guy. So maybe I could message Title and ask him to set me up a meeting with Jen, just to talk about the company, and then maybe I can get a referral that way. Or you could type in Splunk HR, or like, here we go. This is great. So talent acquisition has Splunk. So this is the type of person that's actually going to be looking at your interview or your resume and actually calling you for the phone screen. So you could send this person a message like, hey, I'm really interested in your company. Maybe could you tell me more about it? I think you're restricted to like 180 characters on this channel, but if maybe they'll have an email on their profile, then you can email them and just give a quick blurb about yourself, maybe pop your resume in there, and then just hope for the best. So I have gotten interviews that way, so that is successful. For recruiters, a lot of times recruiters will message you, especially if you have a good LinkedIn profile. I noticed that as soon as I listed Amazon on my LinkedIn, I got probably like a dozen emails from recruiters, and I still get them, like, I don't know, maybe once a week or something, then offer me random jobs. Of course, they tend to be like in Uzbekistan or something for some reason, but I definitely know people that have gotten messaged on LinkedIn, and they've ended up with taking the job that way. So make sure try to check your LinkedIn and your emails fairly regularly, so maybe you can see some of these offers. But for recruiters, I just want to touch really quickly on tailoring your CV. So what I was talking about before, tailoring your CV, that's tailoring it towards a specific job. If you're posting your resume, or you're giving your say you're contacting a recruiter like, hey, can you get me a job? You probably want to give them like a general resume. So try to tailor it to kind of like a general setting, rather than giving them the resume that you've just given for, you know, like a really specific company. Referrals. So referrals, it's great if you can if you have a friend that works there and they can refer you. That's the best. I got referred when I got my position at Amazon through a friend that worked there. If you don't know anybody that works at the company, you could always try what I talked about before. If you have a friend of a friend who knows them, you can message them, try to get a meeting set up, or you can just directly message them on LinkedIn, which might be a bit more aggressive. It could be construed in the wrong way, but you know, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to try. Worst thing they can do is ignore it. Should I apply and use a referral? Oh, yes. So one quick thing. I know that for some companies, if you apply at the company, that'll nullify your referral, because a referral is generally going to get the person who referred you like $500, $1,000, whatever, if you actually get the position. So if you have somebody that's referring you, make sure you haven't applied to the position and that you don't apply to the position, because otherwise that's going to nullify the referral, and then it's only going to be viewed in the regular channel, or at least you're losing your friend like $1,000. So both. So let's talk about online assessments. So online assessments are generally the first thing you're going to get, at least for larger companies. Smaller companies will probably go straight to the phone screen, but larger companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook, the whole FANG network, they're definitely going to send you online assessments. So they're typically one of two styles. Like you'll get an online assessment 1 and then an online assessment 2, sometimes even a 3. The first one, I know for Amazon, it was bug fixing and logic testing. So not real and not much you could do in the ways of preparing for it. The bug fixing portion was something like 35 minutes, and there were seven coding sections, and I had to go and find all the bugs and fix them, and that was tough. Like they specifically make it so that you don't have enough time to finish it. So like if you do finish, you look amazing. But if you only finish like 3 out of 4 of them, or out of 7, don't feel too bad. I think I got the job and I only did maybe 3. Obviously, try to do all of them, but. And then the second half was kind of this logic testing. So it was like, if Marie and Alberto are sitting at a table and Alberto has 2 apples and Marie has whatever, blah, 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 how many apples are, I don't know, those questions that you might see on like an IQ test or something, just to test kind of like your logic and reasoning capabilities. That could be there as well, but not really any way to prepare for those. So. But the second type is actually a coding assessment. So I'm sure you guys have heard of LeetCode or HackerRank now, which they have problems like if you have an array of numbers and you want to find the maximum, a subarray with the maximum amount, how are you going to do that? And you have to work through it and tailor your code for you to get this problem. And that's very common. That's almost 100% is going to be an online assessment is going to be one of those things. So when I did it for Amazon, there were 2 questions, and I think I had 90 minutes, and I finished the first one with I think 10 out of 20 test cases, and my second one didn't even compile. So if you can't finish it, don't feel bad. Just make sure your code's really clear, readable, and that you have a good amount of documentation, comments, whatever. Just so that if it doesn't run, people can at least look at it and tell if you're going in the wrong direction. The last thing you want is somebody to look at your code and it's a complete mess and they have no idea what's going on. So phone screenings. So phone screenings are typically done by HR or HR or a recruiter. Sometimes HR is the recruiter, but so the person that is doing the phone screen might not be someone technically minded. I know when I used to work as an engineer, we had phone screenings done by our recruiter, and we basically gave her questions to ask them, and then we gave her the list of like kind of typical answers. And if they didn't get some of the typical answers, they would just get ignored and moved on to the next person. So you got to keep in mind that this person might not be technically minded. So explaining it in layman's terms is going to be a smart way to go. But obviously, if you need specifics, you can go into specifics. These things they're not going to ask you to actually do any coding. Like if you're doing coding, it's probably going to be a video interview. But phone screens are just they'll ask you some general questions about yourself, like. What's your greatest strength? Kind of typical interview questions, maybe 2 or 3. It'll be like a 20 to 30 minute type of thing. And then they'll ask you some technical questions like describe your favorite algorithm, how many types of programming languages can you name, what's the difference between a process and a thread. These are all questions I've actually been asked in phone screens. And lastly, research the company. Research is extremely important. Again, I'm gonna repeat this a lot because it's very important. Last thing you want to do is get caught with your pants down and you don't know anything about this company. You've just applied randomly to, you apply to 100 random places, and now you're getting a phone screen. You don't know how to answer any of their questions. So make sure you research the company because you'll look bad. So a general interview. I don't think this is generally going to happen for internships, but I thought I'd cover it. This is sort of like the phone screen where they invite you in and they're not going to ask you some technical stuff. They're just going to ask about you, your personality, because basically the number one most important thing about an interview is, can I work with this person? Like if they're interviewing you, they're probably going to assume that you at least have the proper qualifications. So now they're trying to assess out of all the people, which person do I like the best? I'm going to be working with this person every single day. Like, are they annoying? Are they condescending? Or do they explain things really well? Are they really communicative? Can we joke around a bit? So they're going to ask you some general questions. And And then if you pass the general interview, then you would be set up with a technical interview. For internships, they generally put the technical interview with the general interview. Like they'll ask you 2 or 3 kind of general questions about yourself, and then they'll move into the technical section. And again, research the company, especially if you're going and sitting in person. So one time, well, an anecdote, one time I didn't research the company and I got a phone screen and it was Clio. And they asked me, so what do you like about our company? And I did some general BS answer. And they're like, well, what specifically do you think about our technologies? Like what part about our technologies that like our services that we provide do you like? And I didn't know what to say because I had no idea what technology they had. I didn't know what they did. I don't even know what the company, like what they worked in. Turns out they do software for lawyers, so I probably should have known that. On the other side, I did research a ton for Amazon, and I researched into their leadership principles. I know they're really crazy about that, and I researched the crap out of this company. And you know what? They actually didn't ask me any questions, but I'm still glad I did the research because if they did, I would have been able to answer them really well. So now this is the most important part, is technical interviews. So for internships, you might get an online assessment. If you don't get an online assessment, you'll get a phone screen. And after the phone screen, then you'll get a technical interview. It's pretty unlikely that you'll only get one interview. It's going to be multiple stages. The first stage, like the phone screen, is just to take their pool of 2,000 applicants and weed them down to 20 or something. And because they can't do 2,000 technical interviews, it's just not possible. I mean, if you put their services at $100 an hour, there's 2,000 applicants, that's $20,000. That's just, it's not reasonable. It's not going to happen. So for internships, you'll probably do like an 80-20 technical personal type of thing. So you'll start off with the first 15 minutes talking about yourself, and then the next 45 minutes will be solving a coding problem. And remember that the person interviewing you, this will most likely be the like either your boss or a peer of yours. So like they most likely will be a software developer. So they're not going to be the same person that you spoke to on the phone screen with HR. So they might ask you the same questions, and don't be afraid to rehash the same things that you told HR. So the general portion of the technical interview, I think, is just as important as the technical part of the technical interview. Because personally, I think I did really badly on the technical part of my Amazon interview, but I did really well on the general portion, and I ended up getting the job. So I actually had this first thing. I had it printed out and pasted behind my computer monitor while I was doing the interview, just so I could, because it was a video interview, so I could remember it. And that's the STAR method. So if they ask you a question like, what's your greatest accomplishment? A bad thing to say, like, oh, like I think just getting into school was really good, or like I got a 4.0 GPA. I think that's my greatest accomplishment. They'd be like, okay, cool, and then move on to the next question. But it's not really like answering their question well enough. Say you're trying to describe a project where you had a conflict with a teammate and what the resolution was. And that's actually a very common question. I've had it quite a lot. So you want to establish the situation. So the situation was I was in a computer science class, 436i, and I was doing we were doing a web development course, and we were making this project which was kind of like Yelp but for gyms and personal trainers. And one of my partners, we had a disagreement. And what we were trying to accomplish was, I can't remember, whatever we were trying to accomplish. Say we were trying to finalize the layout of the personal trainer section, and he had the opinion that it should be set up like this. My opinion was this. So the action I took was I de-escalated the situation. I brought it up to the rest of the team. We talked about it a bit more. We opened it up with some more options, and then as a team we agreed on which option to take for it. And what resulted is that we both ended up happy because we were both happy with the results, and the page looked really good. Blah 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 blah. So this style of answering questions, I think, is really powerful. because it actually makes you think about a few different things. So first off, situation that gives context. Task tells them what you're doing. Action tells you what you did, and the result, which is very important. It's that's when you can offer up metrics to say like what you did and what you accomplished. And I find that if you break it up in these 4 different sections, you can actually talk a bit. You can talk a bit longer, and it'll kind of remind you about things that you might not otherwise remember when you're doing your interview. So again, prepare and research and practice. So research, absolutely critical. I think I've beaten that horse already though. Prepare though. A lot of people prepare for the technical part of the interview, but they don't prepare for the general portion. And like I said, it's just as important. So the type of preparation you can be doing is you can have these typical questions and just ask yourself the question and say it out loud, and then you can take notes on what you thought was good, take notes on what you thought was bad. If some people you might be worried that if you're just kind of rehashing something in an interview, that could be construed as a bad thing. But personally, I think that if you have an answer to a question prepared already, like it shows that you're willing to spend a lot of time and effort into this interview, and coming off as well prepared is much better than coming off it as not prepared at all. So you definitely want to solidify your answers for typical interview questions. So a lot of interviewers, they'll ask about projects you've done on, they'll ask about conflicts you've had, they'll ask about any accomplishments that you're proud of. And in my experience, they're kind of shying away from the kind of tropes of interviews, like what's your greatest weakness? I've never been asked that in an interview, except like back in 2010, because I'm old. But yeah, feel free to research kind of typical interviewing questions, even specifically for computer science, and just practice these out and make sure that you can actually answer any of them. So now one of the most important things, or at least the most typical thing, is the coding assessment. So I have mixed feelings about this because I feel like coding assessments generally don't assess your ability to perform on the job. It's kind of weird. Like if you're really good at answering those questions, it doesn't translate at all into your job, but you have to be good at answering these questions. It's almost like a gauntlet that you have to run. Like you have to practice these questions and spend a lot of time on them. And the unfortunate part is that now that LeetCode and HackerRank exist, the questions are getting more difficult because people know the typical ones, like N queens. It used to be a really common question, but now it's never asked because it's one of the most popular ones on LeetCode. So they got to come up with their own questions. They're more obscure, a lot more difficult. And now you get to the point where you have 45 minutes to solve 2 graph problems, and it's completely ridiculous and kind of insane and unreasonable. But that's the state of the industry. So it is what it is. So the interviewer they'll generally ask you 1 to 3 coding questions, depending on time. I think 2 is a very, very typical thing to see. So you want to solve these relatively quickly because then you might not have time for the second one. But if you only do 1, that's probably okay too. But 2 is definitely typical. Again, prepare. Preparing is vital. The unfortunate part about, like I was saying, the unfortunate part about these interviews is that they'll have expected you to see some of these questions before. So if you're completely unprepared for it, it's going to be really difficult for you. And if you're completely unprepared and you're yeah, I guess I said that already. But if you practice these questions, you'll get a kind of feel for them, and then it'll just, even if you haven't seen the question before, it'll just become easier because you kind of have some tips and tricks. Like, oh, I saw something kind of similar in a different question. Maybe I can kind of like segue it into this solution. Maybe it'll work there. You know, that's why they teach you stuff like dynamic programming in 320. So smaller companies, they're going to ask you easier questions. Like I've got a question at a smaller company that was reverse a string, which is pretty simple. But FANG companies, that's Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, for you that don't know. Although I think the the acronym is a lot bigger these days. They're going to ask a lot more difficult questions because they are higher paying jobs and they're more prestigious, as they say. So Amazon probably the easiest out of all the FAANG companies, which is good for us. We're in Vancouver. There's 12,000 Amazon jobs coming up. Google's going to be a little more difficult, and from what I've found, Facebook is going to be the hardest. Well, Google is arguably the most difficult, but from what I've heard from my friends, Facebook will ask extremely difficult questions. Like they'll ask, my friend did an interview where he got asked two leet code hards, which personally they can take me like an hour and a half to solve each one, and somehow he did them both in 45 minutes. So yeah, you definitely want to prepare if you're going for a larger company like this. I actually spent 3 weeks last year preparing for Facebook before I even applied, and then I got a letter of rejection in like a day. I was extremely pissed off, but that's the industry. So a nice feature about LeetCode is that you can actually see which companies, which questions are asked by which companies. So if you go down here, you can see top Facebook questions. Of course, it's locked because I don't have premium. But if you want to prepare specifically for getting a job at Microsoft or Google or Apple or whatever, that's a really good resource. You can go through all of these and see their typical questions and hopefully get a better feel for what will actually be asked in the interview. cscareers.dev Discord is also a really good resource. If you want to jump in that, actually, you know what? That stands for Computers CompSci 340 UBC midterm. By the way, that's Discord just made that the acronym, so that's not me. You can. It has a bot where you can ask the problems that Bloomberg typically asks, and it has links to all of them. So this is a really good resource if you want to practice for specific companies. Also, like there's tons of different stuff on here. There's stuff about new grads. There's tons of information on here. So if you want, feel free to join in. It's public. So cscareers.dev. Go ahead and join that. Oh, there's also sections for salary sharing. So you can see how much, like Amazon. Okay, I'm going to be making $140,000 if I move to Seattle. Jesus Christ, $205,000. The States is just crazy. Anyway, and another really good resource is Cracking the Coding Interview. It's a book. I have it on my shelf. I don't feel like getting though. Cracking the Coding Interview is kind of where LeetCode got its inspiration from, I think. So it goes over some typical questions, how to answer them, and I think it's a great resource that everybody should read before they start doing difficult technical interviews. Oops. And yeah. So let's get into the coding assessment, because I think that's what most of you are going to be concerned about, and rightly so. So most people will think that if you solve the problem that you're going to get the job. That's not the case. So the most important part about solving the problem is communication. So like I said, I didn't solve the problem. They had to give me a couple hints, and then I eventually solved it. But they had to give me some hints, and they kind of prodded me in the right direction. So I don't really think like I did well at the coding part, but I was communicating really well. I was describing my thought process. I had a good amount of pseudocode. And I think because of that, that's why I ended up getting the job. So as you're, it's kind of strange because you're just kind of talking out loud. You're talking about what you're going to do and what algorithm you might implement, or what data structures you're going to use. It's kind of strange. So I think that's why practicing is really interesting, or really important, because you can kind of get a feel for it, and that sense of weirdness goes a bit away. I think the second most important thing is going to be pseudocode. So if you guys don't know what that word means, pseudocode is basically just solving the question in plain English. So you don't need to know how to even program if you just want to write pseudocode. Because you guys, if you're taking 110 right now, at some point you're going to solve a Rubik's a Sudoku board, and that's a LeetCode hard problem. And you're doing it in your first year. So don't think that you can't do these questions. You might not know the exact syntax to use, but at least you can write out your thought process. You can write down your algorithm, write a for loop and whatever I'm doing in the for loop, and just your pseudocode will be able to solve it. And then once you've solved the question in pseudocode, translating it into code is generally very easy. And a really important thing too is you can get stuck on syntax. So if you just jump straight into coding, you can get stuck on syntax. Like you're worried about I don't remember what this function's name is called. Like what should I name these variables? Blah 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 blah. But if you have your kind of your structure in your pseudocode, then you can just kind of translate it over, and it's much simpler. It's like the analogy would be writing an essay with when you have an outline for the essay versus writing an essay when you don't. If you're writing an essay and you don't have an outline, you might start like meandering and your thoughts are all over the place. You'll forget stuff. But if you have a solid outline of the essay, I find that translating that over to an essay is pretty simple. Well, relatively speaking. So yeah, like I said, you should solve the answer before you do any coding, because if you're halfway through your coding and then you've coded stuff out wrong, it's just gonna be messy and it's gonna waste time. If you do your pseudocode first, it's gonna take a lot less time to get your answer when you do it in pseudocode. You're not gonna be hung up on syntax. It's gonna be a lot easier. But there are times when you're gonna be stuck, and you shouldn't be afraid to ask for a hint. I had to ask for a hint in my Amazon interview, and I've also had to ask for hints in my Splunk interviews, and I had to ask for a bunch of hints in one of my other interviews, and I really bombed that. But obviously, it's not the most ideal case if you have to get a hint, but it's better to take a small hint and then be able to finish the problem rather than just be stuck on it. You're quiet for 5 minutes, the interview gets a bit awkward. So I think if you're stuck for more than maybe a minute, I'd ask for a hint. Even a minute might be a bit long if you're completely banging your head against the wall, you don't know what to do. And remember that you're not necessarily expected to solve the problem. That's obviously the ideal case, but a lot of times, I know people that they haven't solved the problem and they ended up getting the job because they've communicated well. Last little tip is be honest. If you've solved the problem before, you should probably tell them. Lying isn't a great way to start a relationship with anybody. And especially do not look up the answer online. If you're doing a video call and suddenly you're typing something in and they're not seeing anything, and then suddenly you know the answer to it, like that's just a really, really bad idea. You'll probably get blacklisted from the company. So practice for these interviews. LeetCode and HackerRank can be really good resources. They have tons, like thousands of problems. If you go to the problem bank, look, there's 14. I got 1,400 ones done. I've done almost 200. So you can go through these, start with the easies, then move up to mediums, move up to hard. A good thing to do is just do like one day. It doesn't take too long. It might take 20 minutes to half an hour, and it gets you in that mindset for interviews. I try to do one a day. I've been slacking a bit lately. I think I did like 40 in September, and now I did like 10 in October, but Cracking the Coding interview also has a ton of great information. It has a lot of typical questions like two-sum or FizzBuzz or whatever. I think that for practice, it's a really good idea to actually solve the problems like you would be doing them in a real interview. And if you're doing an in-person interview, they're going to get you to do whiteboarding. So whiteboarding is just solving the question on a whiteboard. Now this is difficult, and this is why it's absolutely critical that you get your pseudocode, maybe not perfect, but you need to get your pseudocode done before you actually do your coding. Because if you write out this whole function, then you realize that you forgot a part. Now there's no room. You'll have to erase half of it and stick it in, and that would be bad news. Yeah, Ben, what's up?
Just curious, what language do you usually do LeetCode in? Do you do it in Python or something else?
I do it in Java. It's in interviews, it's not a huge issue if you like. I did a Java interview at a company that doesn't use Java. Um, I did I did I interviewed at a place that uses C, and I tried to do it in C, and I got hung up on syntax, and I did really badly on that. So you should use whatever language you're comfortable with. I think them being experienced developers, they're going to have some. Maybe they've never used Python too much, but they're going to get the general gist of it, and the logic of it is the most important part. So yeah, it doesn't matter what language you use,
Thank you.
unless it's like really obscure. But yeah, Java, C, Python, yeah, that's all gonna be fine. So yeah, try to solve these problems on a whiteboard, because it's weird. Like it's a really weird thing not being able to type stuff in. So actually doing it on a whiteboard is going to get you into good practice. Another tip I have for you guys: if you're solving questions on Leet code, it's really common. I know it is for me to use the solve button as a crutch. Where you type in some stuff and you're like, oh, let's see if that works, and you hit the button. They're like, oh, there's an error. Okay, let's fix that. Then you hit the button. Oh, there's an error. Then you fix it. There's a button. Oh, that one didn't solve it. Here, let me try to. And then you just keep going, hitting the button until you finally get the answer. But you can't do that in an interview. So I would highly recommend not hitting solve not hitting the solve button on Leet code until you're absolutely sure that this is the correct answer to the problem, because that's what it's going to be like in a real world interview. And if you do this, you'll get better at debugging, much better at debugging, because you'll have to go through your own code, assess your own logic, and see where the problems are. And try not to look up any answers to problems, because once you've seen the problem, once you've seen the answer, then that's it. Sure, you're going to know the answer to that specific problem, but you're not going to be developing your problem solving skills. So I would recommend not looking up the answers unless you're so stuck and you've tried this thing 3 times, you spent 3 hours on it, and you just can't figure it out, then sure, look it up. And write out your solutions. So I don't know where it went. Anyway, I have a pad of paper where I actually draw stuff out. So, oh, there it is. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but yeah, so okay, this is probably going to be really tiny, but I was doing a coding problem that I couldn't really figure out. Couldn't remember what it was, but basically I just took 10 minutes and I wrote out a couple examples. And as I was writing out the examples, I figured out what kind of algorithm I was able to use, and then I was able to get the right answer. But I don't think it would have been possible if I didn't write it out. So even if you're in interviews, don't be afraid to get a pad of paper and just tell the interviewer, like, hey, can I just have 2 minutes? I'm just going to write this down and try to see if I can figure it out. I think they'll understand. It's a bit more difficult if you're doing an in-person interview, but then you can just do that. You can just do that on a whiteboard. So I've kind of been just flying through this whole thing. Does anybody have any questions? Do you want me to go over anything else? Because I'm mostly done here. Also, feel free. You guys can interrupt me at any time. I tend to ramble on some things.
So far, that's been good for me. I can't think of any specific question right now.
Cool. Well, I was trying to be fairly comprehensive.
Yeah, I have a question. Could you just clarify when you were saying on LeetCode don't use the solve button as a crush? You mean like don't use the button to have it like check your solution completely, but you would be able to like run code in an interview, or?
No, well, you can't submit. For you that don't know, run code runs your code against your test case, and submit runs it against all of their test cases. And you're not going to have the option to do either of those in an actual interview, because you're going to be on a whiteboard. So I highly recommend, do not use this button down here. It's so tempting, but don't do it. Make sure as you're typing in all your code, make sure that that you know it works before you click that button. And I think that's really valuable.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just not sure what you meant by debugging exactly.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Well, I guess we're done with this part. I just think the one thing I want to stress again is for technical interviews is pseudocode. So really make sure that you know how to solve the question before you even type any code. Oh my God, I forgot something. Okay. So yeah, pseudocode is extremely important. Another thing that's extremely important and messes me up literally every single interview and a lot of the practice sessions is I don't read the problem. I'm terrible with it. I don't read the problem. I don't understand the question fully before I attempt to solve it, and it's really bad. I've had interviews where I've started to, he's talked about the problem, and I'm like, okay, I think I get that, and then I go straight into solving it. But turns out I misunderstood the question. So I had an interview where they asked me a question: if you have a string of characters, what is the longest string without a repeating character? And I interpret that as what is the longest string without two characters in a row? And I solved it like that. And it took me 20 minutes. And after I finished solving it, he started pointing out test cases where it wouldn't work. And I realized I fundamentally misunderstood the question he was asking me. So very important. Try to make sure you understand the question. So something that's really useful is write out some test cases and make sure that you that you know what's going on. So like say like, okay, so I have the string SAIPRTS. So that's going to return. So that's going to stop there. That's going to return length 1, 2, 3. That's going to return length 7. Okay, if I have SS, that's going to return length 2, you know, stuff like that. Write out a bunch of your test cases, just like you do in CompSci 110, and make sure that you're on the same page and agree with the interviewer on your test cases before you go out. And also do test cases like, okay, I've got an empty string, or if you're working with lists, I got an empty array, or it's feeding a null to the question. Make sure you're covering all your test cases, because in general, it's pretty easy to solve it for most test cases, but it's really difficult to solve it for the last few niggly test cases. So yeah, my tip to you: read the damn question, because I always forget about that. I know it sounds dumb, but it's true and it's a problem. So yeah, I guess my two biggest takeaways for coding assessments would be write out your pseudocode, and that's including any diagrams you might need, and make sure you've read the question properly and you know exactly what you're trying to solve. Does anyone have any questions? Well, I guess that wraps up the workshop portion. I'm going to talk quickly about the prep sessions that I'm going to be hosting. So every Wednesday at 6, I'm going to be hosting interview prep sessions where you can join in. I'll pair you up with a partner, and both of you will give each other interview questions, one at a time. So I was doing this in the summer with a group of friends, and it worked out really well. Typically takes half an hour to 45 minutes each person. Oh, I've been ignoring the chat. Call it Lisp? I don't understand.
Well, Racket's basically Lisp, so
Lisp?
if you can just call it Lisp and then act superior. People
Oh, is it?
think that you're some kind of Lisp guru.
Well, yeah. So if you only know how to code in Racket, don't worry. Like I was stressing before, pseudocode is the most important thing. And like I said, you guys will solve a Rubik's, or Rubik's Cube. You guys will do a Sudoku solver, which is a LEET code hard question. So that's a hard question to do, and you guys are going to do it in Dr. Racket. So don't feel like you can't join in. We'll just pair you with someone who also does something in Racket, and then you can just work out the pseudocode portion of it. And once you figure out the pseudocode, the syntax is generally pretty easy. So I'll be sending out a survey in the next week or so, well, the next few days, to assess skill levels so I can pair you guys up appropriately. I'll be sending that through BCS email. So if you're interested, you don't have to join every week, but I think try to, because these are extremely important. At the end of the day, getting a job is the most important thing in this whole program. And this is going to be some really, really valuable resources to help you prep for it. So yeah, every Wednesday at 6, we'll be starting next week, and I'll be sending out a survey to assess your skill levels, and all skill levels can join in. You guys have any questions? I actually finished a bit early, so I can take general questions about anything if you guys want.
I guess of your friends that have gotten work elsewhere or maybe with larger companies, has it been a good mix of referral versus like just straight application, or do you find that like people that get the positions tend to be referred? I guess maybe talking internships.
Well, referrals, it's much less likely for you to get a referral. So like I'd say if you do
Okay.
I've done, I don't know, maybe 100 applications, but I've only ever had one referral, and the referral got me the job. So I think if you have a referral, it's much more likely, but it's also much less likely to actually get a referral. Out of all my friends, I'm not too sure actually. I know that most people do apply through the normal channels. So it's, yeah, like you definitely can get jobs through the normal channels. It's just more likely if you have a referral.
Cool. Thanks.
Jobs related to data analysis. To be honest, I really don't know too much about data analysis or data science because I'm not super interested in it. From what I do know, if you're talking about machine learning, generally jobs, you'll probably be getting a master's in machine learning if you're going to be working in the field, and data science, you're going to need to have a really solid stats background. Neither of which I have, so I don't have too much information about it. All right, guys, if there's no more questions, thank you all for coming. I'm going to post this on YouTube. It's a little bit shorter than I thought it'd be, but that's okay. Still about an hour long. No problem. Anytime. I live to serve. So good luck with exams and everything. And how do I stop recording?